The evening was meant to be ordinary. A gathering of friends around a long wooden table, soft golden light from the chandelier above, the clink of wine glasses, laughter spilling into the night air. My best friend sat across from me, her eyes glowing with happiness, her hand lightly resting on her husband's arm as she told a story that had us all smiling. I had always admired their bond. They seemed to embody everything steady, everything safe. I remember thinking how lucky she was. How rare it was to find a man who made you feel seen in every room. But as the evening deepened, I noticed something I hadn't before. His eyes lingered on me a moment too long when I spoke, his smile stretching just slightly wider than politeness demanded. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. He was my best friend's husband, the man who'd been in our circle for years, who'd attended birthdays, holidays, even quiet nights in with pizza and bad movies. He was safe, wasn't he? The conversation flowed as the plates emptied, stories weaving over one another. I got up to take dishes to the kitchen, and he followed, carrying a tray. It was nothing unusual, until it was. When we were alone, he leaned close. His hand brushed against mine as we set the plates down, not by accident, not in the clumsy way of a crowded kitchen, but deliberate. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as his voice lowered. "You look beautiful tonight." It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them. Weighted, intimate, as though they weren't meant to be spoken aloud. My pulse quickened. I forced a laugh, dismissive, light, hoping he would retreat back into the safety of boundaries. But he didn't. His gaze held mine, steady, daring. The sound of footsteps in the hall startled us, and I stepped back as my best friend entered, smiling, carrying more glasses. She didn't notice the stillness that had passed between us. She didn't see the way I avoided looking at her husband. The rest of the night passed in a blur of laughter and music, but beneath it all, my mind churned. Every word from him seemed sharpened with hidden meaning. Every glance felt heavy. By the time I left, the air outside felt too cold, too sharp against my skin. I hugged my best friend goodbye, her arms warm, trusting, full of love I no longer felt worthy of. That night, in the silence of my room, I replayed the moment in the kitchen. His eyes. His words. His hand brushing mine. Had he really crossed a line? Or was I seeing shadows where none existed? The doubt gnawed at me. But deep down, I already knew. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Each time I closed my eyes, the scene replayed, his whisper, his hand, that unwavering look. My stomach twisted as if I had betrayed my best friend simply by existing in that moment, simply by not shoving him away harder, louder, enough for the world to hear. Morning light offered no relief. The guilt clung to me, heavy and sour. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that silence would be safer than truth. After all, why shatter something so beautiful as her happiness? But silence has a weight of its own. Days passed, and each interaction felt poisoned. When my best friend texted me, "Lunch this week," I stared at the screen, fingers hovering, unable to type a simple yes. When I finally saw her, her laughter rang the same as always, her trust as effortless as ever, and I sat across from her feeling like an imposter. He was there too, at gatherings, at dinners. Always careful, always measured, but never without those looks. The ones that burned into my skin, silent reminders that I hadn't imagined it. That it had happened. That it could happen again. I became an actress in my own life, smiling too brightly, speaking too quickly, avoiding his gaze. And yet, the silence between us roared louder with every passing day. One evening, after another group outing, I returned home restless. I poured a glass of wine and tried to distract myself, but the memories surged back, unwelcome and sharp. How could I look her in the eye knowing her husband had spoken to me that way? How could I sit across the table from them both, watching her lean on him, trust him, love him? The truth was a prison. Speak it, and I risked breaking her heart. Hold it, and I felt it breaking me instead. Then came the message. A notification lit my phone, and his name appeared. My breath stilled as I opened it. Just a few words, but enough to confirm everything. "I can't stop thinking about you." My hand shook as I read it. There it was, undeniable, in black and white. Proof that I hadn't imagined his intentions. Proof that he had crossed not just a line, but a chasm. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My chest tightened, fury and fear warring within me. He had made me complicit in a secret I never wanted. He had dragged me into a betrayal I didn't choose. And worst of all, I knew this was only the beginning. I must have read that message a dozen times before I could breathe again. I can't stop thinking about you. The words crawled under my skin, poisonous and sharp. My first instinct was to delete it, to erase all evidence and pretend it had never been sent. But my thumb hovered, frozen. Because part of me needed to know, would he stop, or would he push further? The next message came minutes later. Last night, in the kitchen. I meant every word. My heart pounded so loud I was sure the neighbors could hear it. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't me imagining shadows. He wanted me to know. He wanted to drag me into his secrets. I slammed the phone down and paced the room. Rage, guilt, fear, all of it tangled into one suffocating knot. I wasn't tempted by him, not truly, but the very fact that he thought I could be made me feel sick. And yet, there was something about his boldness that unsettled me, a flicker of danger that lingered in my chest. 4 days, I avoided them both. I turned down invitations, dodged texts, made excuses. But silence couldn't stretch forever. Eventually, I knew I had to face him. It happened at a cafe, one I often visited after work. I hadn't expected him to be there, but there he was, sitting at a corner table, coffee in hand. Our eyes met, and I knew I couldn't run this time. He stood, walked over, and lowered his voice. We should talk. I followed him outside, my stomach twisting. The street was busy, the autumn air crisp, yet the world felt narrowed down to just us. What do you want from me? I snapped, my voice sharp with fury I'd been holding back. He looked at me, unflinching. I want honesty. You feel it too. The audacity of his words made me reel. Feel what? Disgust. Betrayal. Because yes, I feel those things. You're married to my best friend. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and for a moment, his expression softened. She doesn't see me anymore. She's distant, busy, always tired. I'm lonely. You notice me. The words stung. They were manipulative, but they carried just enough truth to unsettle me. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, to demand how he could betray her trust so carelessly. Instead, I forced my voice steady. You crossed a line. And if you ever do this again, I'll tell her. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it, didn't apologize. Instead, he gave me one last look, searching, almost pleading, before walking away. As I stood there, trembling, I realized something with crushing clarity. It wasn't over. Not until I decided whose heart would break, mine or hers. The secret gnawed at me until it was unbearable. Every time I saw my best friend, her laughter so pure, her trust so effortless, I felt the weight pressing harder. It wasn't just his betrayal anymore. It was mine, too, for keeping it. I tried convincing myself silence was kinder. That ignorance was protection. But every glance from him reminded me I wasn't protecting her at all. I was shielding him. The breaking point came one evening when she invited me over for wine. We sat on her couch, feet tucked under us like we'd done 100 times before. She talked about work, about plans for the holidays, about him, always with that same warmth, that same certainty. And I couldn't stand it any longer. My throat tightened as I set my glass down. There's something I have to tell you. Her smile faltered. She leaned in, concern flickering in her eyes. What is it? The words tore out of me, raw and trembling. I told her about the kitchen, about the message, about the confrontation at the cafe. Each sentence felt like ripping stitches from a wound, exposing the ugliness beneath. She listened in silence. At first, her expression was disbelief, as though I was describing a stranger, not her husband. Then came the hurt, deep and unshielded, her face crumpling as though the ground had been pulled from under her. When I finished, the silence was deafening. Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I was afraid, I admitted, my voice breaking. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of breaking you. But I couldn't carry it anymore. She didn't answer. She stood, pacing the room, hands shaking as she pressed them to her face. I wanted to reach for her, to offer comfort, but I knew I was part of the pain now. That night ended with no resolution. She asked me to leave, her voice small, exhausted. I walked home with tears stinging my eyes, knowing the damage was done. In the weeks that followed, I heard fragments. She confronted him. There were arguments, accusations, sleepless nights. The trust they'd built, the trust I'd admired, was fractured beyond repair. And between us, things were never the same. She loved me, I knew she did, but every time she looked at me, I saw the echo of betrayal in her eyes, not from me, but through me. One dinner party had unraveled everything. I don't regret telling her. She deserved the truth, even if it shattered us both. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I think back to that night, to the brush of his hand in the kitchen, and I wish I had shouted then, loud enough for the whole room to hear, before silence had a chance to turn into poison. Because in the end, I didn't just lose her trust. I lost a piece of myself, too.